Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post. This is episode 2, Monday, March 25th. I'm Ryan Sampson, but of course, the star of the show, Joel Sherman. Joel, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm getting out of Dodge. I'm doing this and then getting on a plane back to New York. I'm talking to you from Steinbrenner Field just after the Yankees and the Mets closed spring training against each other. As I'm speaking to you, the Yankees were loading up for a bus to go to the airport to go to Houston. The Mets were heading to the same airport to go back to New York to open up against the Brewers. So we're right at the end. I always hated this day in spring training when I was the beat guy in the way back because you did 6 weeks of spring training. It's really wearying. You work every day, and then you have 162 games left. It's like running a marathon to run a triathlon.
The baseball season is a marathon, Joel, and we are 3 days away from opening day. Like you mentioned, the Yankees getting ready to go to Houston and face the Astros for Thursday as Game 1 approaches. So, Joel, I want to start off with our first pitch, though. Let's talk about this DJ LeMahieu injury. Going on the IL, obviously, with that foot injury, the bone bruise. He's had several injuries with this foot. So when you're looking at this injury with DJ LeMahieu and the fact that the Yankees have already dealt with a couple other big-name injuries this spring training as they get ready to start the season, how concerned are you with this DJ LeMahieu injury as it looks like the Yankees aren't going to have their leadoff guy to start the season?
Well, you always want your best players available. I tend to think, I wonder if this show is going to be have an issue every week, which is we're going to be very myopic about the Yankees and act like 29 other teams don't have injuries at this time of year. The question is, does this become epidemic again during the season? That's been the problem the last few years. They've had widespread injury for the team. This spring, as crazy as it sounds, because they lost their ace, they've been relatively healthy. The Judge injury, they kept telling us was nothing about nothing, and it turned out to be nothing about nothing. He played, I think, 4 of the last 6 spring games. Rizzo played today as the DH, said that his lat injury wasn't anything. I mean, DJ LeMahieu fouled the ball off of his foot. Just because he had a previous foot injury, I think that's kind of like putting 2 and 2 together when I'm not necessarily sure that that's right. I mean, he could have fouled the ball off his shin and had a deep bone bruise, and we wouldn't put those two things together. That being said, he's the oldest starting third baseman in the major leagues now that Josh Donaldson and Evan Longoria aren't in the sport anymore. Anthony Rizzo's the 5th oldest first baseman. Giancarlo Stanton is among the oldest designated hitters. So that's part of the portfolio of being this team. You know who else has a lot of age? The Dodgers have a lot of age. The Blue Jays have a lot of age. The Phillies have a lot of age. I just named 4 teams that are expected to do very well this year.
No, it's a great point by you, Joel, about the age of this roster. But to your point, it feels like we might be going to that same thing of how many injuries are going to affect this team and how many of these big name players are going to be hurt on this Yankees roster.
Or we might not.
I
think at this point, we don't know anything injury-wise about this season. I'm not sitting with the injury list of 30 teams, but I bet you the Yankees have fewer injuries this spring than the average team. And I would point out that they're going to play the Astros, whose rotation is devastated to begin this season. Look, I think I said this last week. I know I've written it in the New York Post. There's no crying in baseball, including about injuries. I went through the litany of teams, including all the ones that won last year, that had big injuries and overcame them. The Yankees have to figure out how to survive in advance for 2 months without Garrett Cole. They hope for just 2 months. They hope they have their ace for the last 4 months in the postseason. And they're probably going to have to survive in advance at least a week or 2 without DJ LeMahieu, who's a very good defensive third baseman and was going to be the leadoff hitter for this team. Good teams figure it out.
Okay, fair enough. And then I want to go on to our next part of the show here, and we talk about this opening day roster. So it's starting to take shape here. We got word Nick Birdie's going to make the opening day roster. Clayton Beater's going to make the opening day roster. But sticking in that DJ LeMahieu section here a little bit, as he's going to the IL, it looks like, Joel, there's possibly 2 bench spots open here. How do you see that being played out as we head into Thursday?
Yeah, I'd just be cautious. There is a ton of transactions coming in Major League Baseball between now and about noon on Thursday. Lots of players who fall into the category. They were, they can opt out at this time of year. Lots of guys out of options, lots of bubble guys at the end of the roster, teams looking for stuff. So the Yankees left here telling Nick Birdie and Clayton Beater, for example, you won the competition at Steinbrenner Field. You are on the plane to Houston. If something better pops up, let's see that. I think the Yankees go to Houston right now. I think Kevin Smith will go from Mexico there. I hope I'm pronouncing Jama Jones is on the plane heading there. I'm not sure what the situation, because Luis Torrens had a out on March 23rd, where I think a 72-hour out. I'm not sure what his status is. I know they liked what they've seen here. I do think the guy who will get a load of playing time early on, especially third base, is Oswaldo Cabrera, who the last 3 weeks of spring training really hit the ball well. I think the Yankees trust his glove almost any place. So I think that's the situation. They have been out looking for somebody who can play the left side of the infield depth piece. If they thought it was better than Jones or Smith, are those the most American names ever? Jones and Smith. And I think they have probably are trying to trade Ben Rodford, who's out of options. And, if Wells and Trevino are going to be the catchers, I don't think they probably want to carry a third catcher. But is it possible for, say, 5 days of the season, they carry a third catcher early this year and then try to sneak them through waivers, because it might be easier when everybody's locked into things 5 days into the season? I don't think that's impossible. So I think they'll be playing with the back end of the roster. I will say, I think one interesting thing, because they open in 2 zones, is usually there's off days early in the season. They've got 7 and 7 days to open this, then a travel day, then they play a lot in a row again, starting with the home opener. So they're going to really test, especially their pitching staff, in the coming days.
Well, it's interesting, Joel, is that, you talk about how many possible transactions could possibly still happen. They could look to maybe trade for a piece or not in that bench spot. So looking at this roster as a whole right now for this Yankees team, we know the New York Post put out their 2024 baseball season preview. And I wanted to talk to you about this Yankees roster overall. What is your sense? Do you feel like this is a championship or bust roster that the Brian Cashman and company assembled this offseason?
Well, I think the mandate is championship or bust. The GM called last year a disaster. So did the owner of the team. They've added Juan Soto to Aaron Judge to Garrett Cole. They have 3 of the 10 best players in baseball, albeit one won't play for a couple of months to begin the year. Is a very important guy on the team. They should score more. Should, right? We'll see. They are more left-handed, which I think is valuable. Verdugo, perhaps Austin Wells playing quite a lot. Rizzo and Soto with Trent Grisham on the bench. And again, I do think Cabrera is going to play quite a lot, especially early in the season. They've been in like the bottom 5 for lefty plate appearances for about 6 or 7 years now. The team that plays in the house that Ruth built, that had Garrett and Berra and Mattingly and Mantle and Reggie, etc. It's strange to go so right-handed like they have in recent years. I think that will help them. I think a big deal is, do Volpe and Wells take a step forward here? Like if I were making the over-under a 725 OPS for both guys, can they get over that? Because if they get over that in a lineup that has Soto and Judge, that will be really valuable. It doesn't have to be 800. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be quality defense and good major league average offense on the way to maybe something better. So I think they'll score more, and this will be redundant from last week, unfortunately, Ryan. I think so much of this season comes down to Cortez, Rodon, and Stroman. All 3 guys were all-stars in the last 2 seasons at some point. If they get 85% of the seasons from when those guys were all-stars, they're going to survive in advance until Cole gets back, and they'll definitely be up there with whoever you think, Orioles, Rays, to challenge for the division. If they don't, it's problematic, like it would be for any team, because then all of a sudden you do what if they're injured? Will Warren, can he step up and help? Luis Gil had a very impressive camp and is going to be the number 5 starter to open the season. Luke Weaver, does he come out of the bullpen? It's the same problem everywhere. There's not enough starting pitching. Once you start going to 6 through 10, it becomes a problem. So the Yankees need those top 5. I'll say this. I was here today. It's the last day of spring training. People have spring training fever. They can't wait to get out of here. So you never know what I thought Marcus Stroman, if they wanted to leave him in yesterday, could have thrown a 70-pitch complete game. The Pirates were swinging before he threw the ball yesterday. Clark Schmidt threw the ball great today. I don't think it was just last day fever. He was really good against the Mets. Does he graduate from just a pretty good innings eater last year, durable guy, made all the starts, to like a quality high-end number 4? Big deal for them. So the number 1 starter is out. What do the other 4 veteran guys do, plus Hill?
And just to follow that up real quick about the rotation, and tell me if I'm crazy. I know I'm already crazy as it is, but this rotation feels like how I felt about the lineup last season, if that makes sense. Meaning that there's a lot of question marks surrounding that rotation, just like the lineup was facing a lot of question marks when we didn't have a left fielder, even though we were told the Yankees need a left fielder. We went in with Wilmer Flores, Jake Bowers, Estevan Florial, and it feels like they were piecing that together and not having enough contact and left-handed bats in the lineup, when I'm feeling the same way about this starting rotation. And we have enough depth pieces. We have the Clark Schmidt, we have Luis Gil, we have Will Warren. We trust these guys that, haven't performed to this point in the majors. Am I supposed to trust that this rotation is going to be able to get them through the first couple of months of Yankees baseball?
So I think we're going to do 2 things every week, Ryan. One is I'm going to have to define when you describe the team as we, that I have nothing to do with that. I think last week I said I don't give a fuck if they win a game. Yep. I probably might end up saying that every week. This goes for 30 times. It's not anti-Yankee. I always assume when a player gives a shit if I win a Pulitzer Prize, I'll give a shit if they win a baseball game. So that's kind of just my general thought on it. The other thing is, I do think because you're a big fan, you're myopic. And you think that somehow the grass is greener every place else. Whose rotation, if you were sitting today, would you go, God, I really feel great about this rotation and great about the next 5 guys? The Mets just played here. The Mets have the highest payroll in the sport. And I understand they're not maybe going for it the way the Yankees are. But, you'd be sitting and saying, do you believe in Luis Severino? Do you believe in Minaya? Do you believe in Adrian Hauser? What about the next group of guys? Really? Budo and McGill and Peterson and the guys after that, Vassell and Hamill and Christian Scott. So this is every team, which is, again, why instead of getting caught up in all of that, I'm Stroman, Rodon, and Cortez were major league all-stars. There's no higher league. They were major league all-stars in the last 2 seasons. If they are close to those pitchers, I'm not making them have to be something they're not. This is what they've been in the last 24 months. The closer they are to that, the more impenetrable the Yankees become as a playoff team. That's it. Okay. It's like they're all pretty, especially Stroman and really Rodon, they're really well-immersed pitchers because of accomplishments recently in the major leagues. It's not far-fetched. I'm not suggesting Clark Schmidt has to be an ace. I'm suggesting guys who were all-stars in the last 2 seasons have to approximate that.
No, I hear you on that. I think what I'm trying to say, though, is those other 2 spots, they're not supposed to be, all-star players. They're not supposed to be top-of-the-line pitching. They're just supposed to be quality, average baseball starting pitching is what I'm trying to say, because the Yankees didn't get that from the Willie Calhouns and Jake Bowers last year. They got below average when you look at that.
The one thing I would just say, though, Ryan, is, and again, we'll see if it changes. I think the Yankee offense has been bad for the last 3 years. It got camouflaged by Judge's historic season in 22, but there were 2 different teams. It was the Jackson 5. There were 5 of them, but everyone cared about Michael Jackson, right? No one really thought that Tito carried the Jacksons, right? It was Judge carried the team. He had over 1,000 OPS, and the rest of the team had a high 600 OPS. It was not a very good offense without him. So I think it's been 3 bad years of offense in a row. I do think the Yankees have gotten excellent at run prevention over about the last 4 or 5 years. They're really good at finding relief pitchers, Ian Hamilton last year, Clay Holmes and Wandy Peralta and Jonathan Loaisaga over the last few years. I think they might have found something if they could keep him healthy here in Nick Birdie, who has outstanding stuff and is that only the 2nd player in the history of the game to make it back to the majors after double Tommy John surgery and thoracic outlet syndrome surgery. Our colleague Greg Joyce wrote a terrific piece about it earlier in spring training. Talked to Sean Hill, who's a scout for the Yankees now, who's the other guy who did it. But the stuff is spectacular. And so, when we talk about injuries, I'm you've got to prove to me that you're going to stay healthy. When it comes to pitching, you'd have to prove to me that the Yankees aren't going to be good at run prevention, because it's been multiple years now that they've done much better. They used to not care about defense. The defense is much better in general, almost everywhere. And they're really, really good at creating, especially bullpen guys out of nothing, and doing enough with the starting pitching, even in bad times, to keep the run scoring down, right? Because with everything that Yankees average league average runs last year, Ryan, they'd probably make the playoffs.
Yeah. No,
right? It was not about whatever went wrong with the pitching. This was about the offense last year. And I think the offense has been bad for 3 years. So let's see if the new additions, especially Soto, change that.
It'd be interesting to see. And Joel, I want to go to our next thing, Radio Rational, where, again, I get to throw my crazy fan theories at you and see if they're rational thought or if it's a...
You should wear like a tinfoil hat when you do this.
I agree. I could look into getting that for you.
And get radio waves from like Kiev or something like that.
Well, here's my theory here. The Yankees are not willing to invest and go sign Jordan Montgomery, who is still a free agent as we are 3 days away from opening day. I don't think the Yankees want to sign Jordan Montgomery because they still don't view him as a top-line starter, even though he proved otherwise during the playoff run that he went on with the Texas Rangers last year. And
Ryan, we get it. So I'm going to ask the same question again. It's the myopic question. You do realize there's 29 other teams in baseball, right?
100%.
Nobody has signed them, right? Like, there's pitching problems throughout the landscape. Everybody is valuing this player the same exact way. Why? Because you're a Yankee fan, should they value him higher?
Because you saw how well he pitched, and they traded
Everyone
him.
saw it. The Yankees weren't the only ones who saw it. The Phillies just lost Taijuan Walker. Why don't they sign him?
So what's more valuable?
The Red Sox don't have any starting pitching. Why don't they sign him? The Astros are -4 starting pitchers right now. Why don't they sign him? Because the number being asked for is way higher than the industry, not the Yankees, than the industry has done it. It's not like you're sitting and saying, the Yankees aren't signing him. Look at what someone else is willing to do. This was the discussion all offseason about Blake Snell. There were people telling me the Yankees had to spend over $200 million on Blake Snell, who ended up signing for what, like 65? Like I know that they're supposed to throw tribute at you guys, the fans, all the time. Just throw the money because it wants. But I'm telling you, the second they sign that guy, you'll start bitching about some other guy that's not on the roster that they have to trade for. I'm sure 2 years ago, you were screaming about Brian Reynolds or someone like that. I watched Brian Reynolds play the other day. He's a third outfielder at best on a good team, like a really contending team. I heard every Yankee fan 2 years ago, oh, you're not really trying if you don't trade for Brian Reynolds, right? Like, I just think that you guys, and maybe it's all fan bases, it feels a little worse with Yankee fans, feel like it's your destiny that all the good players have to play on your team. And that the ownership here has to throw tribute at you $1 at a time. They have a $300 million payroll. They have 4 guys who have been all-stars in that rotation in the last 2 years. 4 when you count Cole, right? I get it. I think that there's probably a number. I'm positive. How about this? I'm positive because I'm here and I'm talking to people, and I would say this about both teams. There is a number that both the Mets and the Yankees would sign Jordan Montgomery at. They haven't gotten to that number yet. You know who else hasn't gotten for the number yet? The other 28 teams in the sport. So when you isolate this, you are suggesting that the Yankees are unwilling to do something, but other teams are. And that hasn't happened. Nobody, if anybody viewed him as a 1 or 2 starter, Jordan Montgomery would be employed right now. He is unemployed because the industry, unless you want to start talking about collusion, the industry believes that this guy's underlying stuff, and I like Jordan, his underlying stuff is a number 3. I think he's the left-handed Nathan Eovaldi, which is he'll give you one thing during the regular season, but you could trust him in the postseason. But that thing in the regular season is basically a number 3 starter.
Joel, I appreciate you as always for giving us your honest take. I know the starting rotation is a highly debated topic with Yankees fans, and I appreciate you just answering all my ridiculous questions and theories about this team. But I want to bring in Tommy Hogan here, Hoganalytics. He's going to talk about the starting rotation. I know he's got a good stat here. Tommy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I know Joel was worried about making it to our second show. We did it. We got our second show. We're here.
That's all that matters.
So the miracle becomes number 3. Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. So I wanted to get into what the Yankees might be seeing in Luis Gil to give him the number 5 starter role here. On the surface in spring training, he was good. 2.87 ERA, 15 2/3 innings, 23 strikeouts. But if you look into the peripherals, stuff plus is a number that Luis Gil was high on these leaderboards throughout spring training. And this stat, it evaluates a pitcher based entirely on the physical characteristics of their arsenal. So it looks at velocity, release point, and movement. There were 29 pitchers that threw over 200 pitches in spring training. Luis Gil was number 1 out of those 29 pitchers in stuff plus with a 131 grade. Second was Bowden Francis, actually, who just got he's a 27-year-old, about to be 28-year-old rookie with the Blue Jays. He just was told he's going to make the rotation. 146 pitchers threw 100-plus pitches in spring training, and he was 5th. So even if you make the sample size a little bit bigger, he is still high on these leaderboards in stuff plus. Nick Pivetta, Alex Lang, Grayson Rodriguez, and Jared Jones, who was just told today that he's making the Pirates opening day roster, were the 4 in front of him. Now, if you compare it to the pitchers that were in the Yankees' 5th spot in the rotation competition, Clayton Beeter, 102 stuff plus. Will Warren, 110. Luke Weaver, 104. So he was way higher on in terms of his stuff than the other guys. And then if you want to compare it to last season, actually, the leader in stuff plus last season was the guy that just got traded to who won the AL East last year, the Baltimore Orioles, in Corbin Burns. He had a 127 stuff plus last season. So Luis Gil pitched above Corbin Burns in spring training this year than he did last season. He had great stuff, and it might be why he won the 5th starter job with the Yankees.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, Tommy, one of the things you try to do is verify with the various wings of an organization how somebody is doing. So when people I try not to ask the Yankees because they'll try to always be generally sunshiny about their own players. The scouts who are on the Yankees really loved what they saw in Hill this spring. They said if it was a competition, he fair and square won the competition. And they were not crapping on the Warrens and the Peters. They thought those guys handled this pretty well, or Luke Weaver, but somebody clearly won. Then I asked the analytics guys who clearly are looking at the data like you're looking at, and they all said he won the analytic battle as well. Having said all that, you named a couple of pitchers like Hill and Bowden Francis, Jones, who I talked to a scout yesterday about on the Pirates. There is no more delusional month than March. This is a very, very, if you've never spent time in spring training, it's a very, very weird place. You're facing competition at all different levels, from like A-ball to the majors. You're facing guys who are working on swing changes or thinking about their golf game later in the day. The wind blows like crazy, especially in Arizona. The sky, you have the high sky, balls get lost here all the time. The umpires are half in it, half not in it. So like, you need to be very, very, you could get fooled by a month of Major League Baseball if you just say watched June. So that's something to keep in mind here, which is you could get fooled by short sample sizes. No short sample size can fool you more than what happens here because the competition is uneven and the atmosphere is bizarre compared to what you do during the regular season. But having said that, somebody had to win the job, and he won it in every way you could win the job, numerically and to the eyeballs.
Fair enough, Joel. We appreciate you talking about Luis Gil. Tommy, that's a great stat. Thank you, man.
Of course. Hopefully we'll be back for episode 3.
Peace.
All right, Joel, let's wrap this up. I want to go to Joel's notebook here. As we approach opening day, is there anything that comes to mind that you just really want to talk about here, a story that you could possibly share about opening day as we get here?
So in spring training 1999, on this day, might not have been March 25th, but on the day where the Yankees were breaking camp, I believe they were going to fly to Los Angeles to play an exhibition game before beginning the regular season. Hideki Irabu didn't cover first base on a couple of fielding attempts, had a generally bad spring where he didn't look in the greatest shape, looked out of it. And George Steinbrenner was the owner of the Yankees, and it was in this ballpark. I don't think it was named for him yet. I think it was still Legends Field at that point. And George was going to the bank of elevators that behind me on the first floor after the game. And I believe as the door was closing, I think I was the one who stuck my foot in so the door would reopen. and we asked George, what do you think about Arabu? And before the doors closed again, George Steinbrenner called Hideki Arabu a fat pussy toad. And that set off a bunch of issues. I'll give you the journalistic issue first. How do you write the word pussy for a newspaper? Want to play the game?
I don't know. How did you, Joel?
It's P-U-S-S-Y, or you can make it P-U-S-S-Y, or you can make it P-U-S-S-Y and put in parentheses rhymes with fussy. But you do have to have a conversation with several of your bosses and editors. How exactly? Because you can't just call him a fat toad, right? Like the whole thing matters that the owner of a baseball team called one of his players a fat pussy toad. The second thing that happened was they couldn't get Arabu to get dressed and get on the plane. And so we are in the clubhouse, reporters, and we're starting to move towards deadline. They can't leave. They have a player who has kind of like gone into lockdown. He's humiliated by all of this, and he won't get on the plane. And just my strongest memory of it is, I think probably the two best leaders on that team, even one, Derek Jeter was still probably his fourth year. He was starting to become more prominent. But David Cone and Chili Davis really were the leaders of that team in a lot of ways. And David Cone and Chili Davis, after a while, they realized we ain't going anyplace. And they ordered pizza for everyone, brought into the clubhouse. And we sat in the clubhouse, and I eventually had to bring my computer. We started moving towards like the first deadline, 7 o'clock. The game ended at 4. It should have been easy. Like, we didn't cover the game. I probably wrote a big story that day about what the Yankees look like going out of here. Well, that went in the shitter, right? Because now I got to deal with how do I get pussy in the newspaper toad? And so I'm literally sitting in the cubicle next to David Cone in the clubhouse with my computer on my lap, eating pizza that him and Chili Davis ordered to the clubhouse. And they finally convinced Arabu to get on the bus. And they were delayed several hours flying cross country to Los Angeles to play a game. I think it was an exhibition game in Dodger Stadium before they began the season. It certainly didn't affect them. They won the World Series again in 1999, but it was Arabu's final season with the team. He got traded after the season, and so it wasn't strictly opening day, but it was the closing day here on the way to the opener, or exactly where we are here. And I'll have you know, Hal Steinbrenner didn't call anybody on the team a fat pussy toad today.
Joel, that's an amazing story. 25 years ago, Hideki Arabu. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you had to write that in the paper, though. How did you end? Did you end?
So I want to say we wrote it as P-U-S-S-Y and in parentheses like rhymes with fussy or mussy or something, like to make it clear what it was. But like literally every newspaper is like, if you're television or radio, you could just say the word. But in the written word, every one of us had to decide at each outlet, how are you handling this? And yeah, that was fat pussy toad.
The good old days of George right there, huh?
Oh, man, they don't make them like they used to.
That's what they say. Joel, that's 2 episodes. I know you're hoping we get to a third. I hope we get to a third.
Yeah.
I am rooting for this.
It's March Madness. We're just trying to survive in advance, man.
Amen. Amen. Joel, you're the man. Thank you so much. I know your time is so valuable. Let's get this thing going. We're going to be back next Monday talking finally some regular season Yankees baseball games.
Where you're going to be miserable by then.
No, I won't.
162-0 is I have a feeling if they went 162-0, Ryan, you'd say, where's the run differential?
No,
here?
See now, Joel, you think the worst of me as a Yankee fan, and I want to change your opinion of me, hopefully.
Okay, well, if we get to episode 3, you could start working on it.
All right, I got you. Thank you, Joel, so much. Appreciate you, man.
All right, all the best.